Corn pre-emerge herbicide rates. You know, when Roundup crops first came out, a lot of people went away from using pre-emerge herbicides, or people like us cut back to a half rate or maybe a 40% rate. You probably can't do that so much anymore.
Well, you shouldn't. And you have to think about this too. At that time, corn was $2.
Yeah.
Maybe corn was $2.50.
Yep.
Now corn's $7 plus. And there's a great potential that this year the corn price could be, very good all through the summer, depending on what kind of crop we have coming next year. So you've got a huge investment out there. You've got this great big crop that's going to be worth a lot of money. Why would you try and trim $3 or $4 or $5 off your pre-emerge herbicide?
Well, because like on our farm, if we have 1,500 acres of corn next year, if it's $4, that's $6,000. Okay, so that's a nice deposit on a college fund or something like that.
Oh, Brian.
Well, seriously, that's the way a lot of people look at it.
You know what's a nice deposit on a college fund is getting another 10 bushels of yield next year. That's
I agree,
much,
but
much
you're not
better.
going to get 10 bushels in most cases. You might get 3 or 4 or 8. 10 is kind of rare.
Well, it just depends on where you're at. Now, if we're talking about an area that has a lot of Roundup resistant weeds, you have to try and control as many as you can before they get out of the ground. Now, we're not just talking about in corn. Obviously, it's the same thing in soybeans or any other crop that you're going to raise. But we're just focusing on corn here for the day. You got to worry about those weeds. If we're out there with a good rate of a pre-emerge herbicide, we've got a lot more flexibility on that timing post-emerge because there's only a few weeds left, not a whole bunch.
Yep, so this is one of the most challenging things in agriculture because I can't honestly sit here today and tell you that using a full rate of herbicide on every single field in the whole country is going to make you money. I really think it's going to make a lot of people money. It'll probably work 98% of the time where it makes you money, maybe 90% of the time. And so you just have to weigh this out a little bit yourself on your farm. But I'll just tell you, in our own operation, we've been trying to control every single weed that's been out there for 30 years now probably, and we still have weed pressure. I can't even believe the weed pressure we still have. I don't know what Darren was doing seeding weeds in the middle of the night or something, but anyway.
I was thinking those were the rows that you used to walk beans in, Brad.
Yeah, but the point is, I will just tell you, over the last few years, we've run a bunch of different programs, Roundup, Liberty, conventional programs, and I just thought it was funny a few years ago when our guys running the combines came in and said, you know, the Roundup fields were the dirtiest fields we had. And I said, boy, that seems awful strange, but you know what? That's where we cut the herbicide rate the most on the pre-emerge herbicide, and that's when we started bumping back up to a half rate and now 2/3 rate. And this next year, honestly, we probably will use a full rate on a lot of ground.
Well, it's not to give Roundup a bad name either to say, oh, the Roundup fields are the dirtiest. It wasn't because of the Roundup.
No.
It's just because Roundup doesn't have residual. So we're relying on the residual control out of our pre-emerge or out of potentially a tank mix partner post-emerge.
So the main thing we're talking about here is potentially bumping your rates of pre-emerge herbicides. We're not debating whether or not you should use a pre. You absolutely should. I'm going to tell you right now, you have to do it. Use a pre-emerge herbicide no matter what. I don't care the situation, you've got to use a pre in corn, it makes you money. The question is, should you bump the rate from a half rate to a full rate in Roundup or Liberty crops?
Well, when you look at this, anytime you're cutting back the rate on any of these pre's, whether it's in corn or soybeans, what are you losing? You're giving up more of the broadleaf control than you are of the grass control.
And that's where Roundup's struggling, is with the broadleaves.
So by doing that, what you're buying yourself is some more time. After you put that pre on, now you've got your corn that's starting to grow. You've got other crops on your farm too. Most farmers aren't just farming corn. And if you've got other crops you're trying to either plant or spray, all of a sudden you got to stop everything, go back to the corn because, oh man, the weeds are already breaking through that pre that I've got. If you're using a full rate, you're going to buy yourself a little bit more time. Maybe it's another week. Maybe it's another 10 days, depending on the weather conditions and weed pressure. That's a big deal.
Yep, and if you don't think that it's worth it to bump the rate, at least do it in a few strips and a few fields and weigh that out and just see what you're seeing for difference.
Well, there's certainly a lot of choices with corn pre-emerge herbicides. We encourage you to look at one, look at the full rate, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you which options control this tough weed coming up next.